What is up, woke family? It's your boy Wokey Bucks, and I'm back again with another live stream video. Mr. R.Kelly sentenced to 30 years in prison for sex trafficking. Full footage. Let's get into it.
Really come as a surprise to me, given the ending. Didn't really come as a surprise to me, given the fact that he, unusually enough, he was convicted of violations of the racketeering statute, what we commonly call the RICO.
So let's read this real quick. R. Kelly sentenced to 30 years in prison. Singer convicted of using fame to target and lure minors into sex. That's crazy.
Statute, which carries enormous penalties. So it was no surprise to me.
So, Paul, as you pointed out, prosecutors were asking for 25 years. The judge issued a higher sentence than that. Why do you think that the prosecution didn't ask for a higher sentence, considering what you said? And how often does that happen, that the judge...
I'm going to tell you why I think they didn't ask for a higher sentence. They want R. Kelly to be alive when he gets out. The man is 55 years old. Correct me if I'm wrong. The man is 55 years old. They don't want him to die in the cell. Now, whoever the judge is obviously thought that what he did by sex trafficking was very, very demonic and wants him to die in the cell. Because let's be real, I think the average American lifespan is 78 years. So if he can live to the way that he's supposed to live, he should be able to make it out and hopefully have a few more years remaining on his sorry for stuttering, guys. A few more years remaining in his life. But the reality of the situation is that I don't think the judge wants that. That's probably why he sentenced him to 30 years. But let's also recall the fact, if this is true, all of the young children that he abused sexually, that's demonic within itself. If it's true, I don't know. Let's continue.
exceeds the prosecution's recommendations?
It does happen fairly frequently. You have to remember that judges sit there through the entire trial. They are, except for ruling on objections to evidence, they form their own impressions of the evidence, of the witnesses.
Are you sure that they form their own impressions, or do you feel like they don't have a bias coming into it, though? That's my only question. Now, I'm not talking about only the R. Kelly case. I'm just saying in general. I'm saying in general. Do most judges come in with a bias? To all the lawyers that are going to watch this video, comment down in the comment section down below and let me know if judges form a bias before they pick whether the plaintiff or the defendant is going to be the winner of the case. Comment down below.
They're staring at the defendants, and judges do have, even in the federal courts, much more so in the state courts, judges do have discretion to exceed what we call the sentencing guidelines. And this particular judge is not known as a harsh sentencer, but she's a very attentive judge.
Okay. It was a woman that judged? Okay, so this is my thing. For the R. Kelly situation, you have to understand, and I'm just going to give you guys a different perspective. Obviously, he was accused of luring minors. Obviously, more likely than that, it was little girls. I don't know if he did or I don't know if he didn't. But understand that as a woman being the judge, it's going to be very, very hard for her to not reason with what those children went through, if they went through the situation, to be able to give him the harshest penalty that he could live through. Right? Now, I'm just going to be straight up and forward and honest and say this right now. If R. Kelly did what he's being accused of, because obviously he's being sentenced, then he deserves what he's getting, 100%, because we don't tolerate that. Now, if he didn't do that, I think it's bad that they made a woman to be a judge. Why? Because let's be real. When it comes to the society in which we live in, women are not good leaders. And some might call me a misogynist, sex, cool. But women are good leaders. Women are meant to be leaders. Women are meant to be followers, and it's meant to be the man to be the leader. Because a man understands, at least a masculine man, understands that he has to be logical in his thought process, in his reasoning, and what he does. If he's not logical, it's going to be very, very hard for society to function. You feel what I'm saying? It takes a masculine man, a strong masculine man, to be a leader. right? Now, does that mean that women can't lead in certain things? No, they can, 100%. But when it comes to a verdict that has to do with life and death situations, or people that have been accused of doing certain things, or let's just say, for example, because I'm not only talking about the R. Kelly, I'm saying in general. You feel what I'm saying? You need a strong masculine male presence to be able to take over and really determine what happened and see things for the way that they truly are. Have that spiritual sense that God gave that person to be able to handle a situation. Let's continue.
And she must have formed some very distinct reactions to Mr. Kelly's demeanor, his constant substitution of lawyers. I think that tended to cut against him. But again, the basic principle would be that she, the judge in the Kelly case, was applying that driving force of the racketeering statute, which was not an element in Ms. Maxwell's sentencing yesterday.
Well, Kelly has replaced his legal team since he was convicted. He is now represented by the same attorney who helped get Bill Cosby's conviction overturned. What does that suggest, Paul, about his strategy?
Well, his strategy seems to be all over the place. If you look at the docket sheet, which is publicly available, Kelly has substituted attorneys with great frequency. He has a right to do that. He did it. Certainly.
Do you think that he did that because he felt like the attorneys, aka the lawyers, weren't competent enough to help him in this case? That might be a reason.
If he believes that by bringing in new lawyers at this late date, just before the sentencing, he's throwing a Hail Mary pass, because the record is already set. The sentencing memoranda of both sides were already submitted, and the judge had probably already made her decision. Certainly, Kelly is going to appeal. Certainly, Ms. Maxwell will appeal. But the unfortunate part for both of them is that convictions in federal court are very infrequently reversed.
And speaking of federal court, Paul, Kelly is facing a separate federal trial in Chicago for child pornography and obstruction charges there. Now, that is expected to start in August. Is today's sentencing going to impact that trial at all?
Possibly.
It's an open question to me, quite frankly, Tanya, and I don't want to get overly technical. Kelly was acquitted by a state court on the charges for which he is now going to be tried in the federal court in Illinois. So, number one, I would have the issue as his lawyer of whether or not he was facing double jeopardy, in effect being tried twice for the same offense. And it may well be that given the sentence here in New York against Kelly, the proceeding in federal court in Illinois, in Chicago, may well disappear. I'm not making that prediction, but that does often happen.
Interesting.
Back on the situation here in New York, does R. Kelly have a route for an appeal? Do you see a basis for that, given the facts of the case?
Well, he actually has. I'll put aside the pornographic element of all of this, which is horrendous. But as a technical matter, and I don't want to, hack in the weeds, I think he may have a stronger basis for an appeal of the racketeering conviction, because essential to establishing a racketeering conviction are a few elements. But in order to do that, you as the government have to show that the victim was damaged in his or her business or property. And it seems to me from the start, a glaring omission here has been the lack of an impact. Well, I don't doubt the suffering of these young women and now grown women, but significantly omitted from the proof was what were the money damages sustained by the victims. And Kelly may have a fairly strong argument along those lines, in which case the substance wouldn't be reversed, but the case might well be sent back for the government to have another try at establishing that critical element of loss of monetary or financial loss.
All right, Paul Bautista, if you could stand by for one moment. We also want to bring in CBS News national correspondent Jerika Duncan, who is outside the courthouse with more on this. Hi, Jerika. Can you give us some color on what happened today inside the courthouse when the sentencing was read?
Well, we were possibly expecting to hear from R.Kelly, but in the end, his attorney said that her client would not be giving any statements, as you guys had just mentioned, those pending cases. But the judge started off by simply saying that the sentencing of another human being was probably the hardest thing that a judge has to do, but laid out what this sentencing was supposed to reflect. The sentence, she said, must reflect the seriousness of the crime, the act as a deterrent, and protect the public from future crimes. She mentioned a number of other things, but at the end, as you just mentioned, of course, if you're just joining us, R.Kelly sentenced to 30 years in prison. The federal prosecutors were asking for an excess of 25 years, so they got what they were looking for. Meanwhile, his defense team was hoping somewhere in the range of 10 years because they felt as though the punishment did not fit the crimes that he was convicted of. Again, we're hoping to hear from some of the victims who were inside today. We know that federal prosecutors are expected to come out and address the media. Something that I thought was very interesting, because we have heard from some of these victims before during the actual testimony. 45 witnesses were called at that time back in September during that 6-week trial. But what I thought was interesting was Faith Rogers, who we first actually interviewed a couple of years ago, and said that she got an STD and unknowingly from R. Kelly when she was 19 years old, went up before the court and talked directly to R. Kelly, talked about what he did to her. But then her father...
Wait, so she claimed that R. Kelly gave her an STI, aka STD, at 19, but isn't she technically a consenting adult, though? And I'm not trying to support him. For those who are going to try to bash me in the comments and say no, but she was technically a consenting adult, right? Now, I think it is a crime. It's not even I think. I believe it's a crime if you know you have an STD and you don't tell the person you have intercourse with before you do. You can go to jail for that, for sure. And I think that's probably what's happening. Excuse me.
Father wanted to address him and said, literally, I want you to look at me man to man, father to father. And he talked about his own experience as a father being abused as a young child, and empathized with R. Kelly, and basically said, you know, we could come here today and be angry and upset, but we forgive you. We have compassion for you, and we believe that there is forgiveness in all of this if you admit to what you did. But as you heard earlier, as I was listening to you all speaking to the attorney, R. Kelly did not admit any wrongdoing. He had nothing to say to the numerous victims today who gave victim impact statements. But again, the judge saying that this was not a case about sex, but that it was about violence, cruelty, and control.
Jerika, I'm wondering, and you touched on it there just a moment ago, but what was it like inside that courtroom as that sentence was read? It's such an emotional time for these survivors. There has been so much emotion leading up to this moment. What is it that the reaction was throughout that courtroom as that sentence was read?
You know, I didn't hear any of the people who testified before, and honestly, I was in the overflow room, so I couldn't get a good look at what, if any, there was an emotional reaction or anything. I didn't hear any sighs of relief or anyone say anything. But I think, without a doubt, having spoken to many of these women before, there is a sense of relief and finality at these sentencings. Obviously, it first happens when the person accused of these crimes is actually convicted, and that happened last year. But now here we are facing the day of sentencing, where these victims or survivors, if you will, get a chance to directly address the person that they say destroyed their lives and change the outcome of what they could have been, what they wanted to be, because of this man that they believe took advantage of them. So just to hear the emotion from them, it was intense. And again, I don't think any of us were expecting to hear from the father of somebody who was abused by R. Kelly.
Sure. Paul, if you're still there, I'm wondering if you could comment.
So I'm curious. So I haven't really done too much research into the situation. Is R. Kelly being convicted of luring the minors to have sexual intercourse with him, or is he being sentenced because of what was the other thing that was being said? Because he gave somebody an STD. I mean, they're all close within the same range, but it's like, bro, they all have their own separate things in which they're being involved in. That's why I'm curious to know, what is he being convicted of? And then on top of that as well too, the people that are claiming that they're victims, what type of investigation was done to ensure that they were actually abused by this man? So for those who know, let me know. Let me know in the comments, man. Like, we're woke family. We need to continue to level up and rise up and figure out, man. Let's continue.
And on what we just heard from Jerika, that, R. Kelly showed no remorse. He had nothing to say to the victims or the family of the victims. I mean, how can that factor into, number one, the chance of an appeal, as we were discussing earlier, and number two, any sort of early, obviously he has a long prison, term ahead of him, any sort of early release from prison?
This is a fascinating case study. I think that Ms. Maxwell's admission of guilt and remorse before she was actually sentenced may have alleviated her sentence to some degree. It was, in a way, an act of courage in a lifetime, and I'm speaking about Ms. Maxwell, that didn't demonstrate a lot of courage. That may have been helpful to her. Kelly's response doesn't surprise me, given the nature of the evidence that shows he was a man who was accustomed to brutality, accustomed to giving commands, and he was not going to, in his view, in his macho worldview, he wasn't going to grovel in front of a...
And this is the one problem I have with the news. It's not even about R. Kelly. It's not even about anything. They try to make it seem like it's biased. You can't bring up macho and then expect people to take you seriously, my guy. Right? You have to try to come across as unbiased. But if you come across as biased, it's like you ruin your argument, man. We'll continue.
A federal judge to get a lesser sentence. Had he shown some remorse? Had he looked the victims in the eye and shown some remorse? He may have gotten a 25-year sentence as opposed to a 30-year sentence. And also in terms of appeal, it's a very, very difficult question. If you have a client at sentencing who says, in effect, I did the crime, that really almost negates any chance he has or she has of a reversal on appeal. It's a very complicated question.
Paul, I'm wondering as well, when you look at these two cases, as we're talking about, what does this potentially sort of, what message does this send to those survivors of abuse, of sex trafficking? Because we have covered, and Jerika has covered extensively, how so many times people who survive this kind of abuse are simply not believed, and how that weighs.
It's not that they're not believed. I think they are believed, especially in the society in which we live in, right? But the thing is that how do we get down to the bottom of it? How do we know whether they're telling the truth or not? What type of investigation process is in order to ensure that these people are telling the truth? That's what we need to figure out. That's what we need to find out. You know what I'm saying? Let's continue.
On them in even coming forward to authorities. We know there's a lag between the time that sometimes crimes occur and that the people who survive are able to come forward. Sort of taken together now, the way that these cases have played out, what's your sense about the message that sends regarding how our judicial system views these cases and these survivors?
Well, certainly, both of these cases, I think, brilliantly demonstrate that the law is very capable of reaching back long distances to try to remedy these wrongs. It also illustrates to me that the persistence of the ladies or other victims, there could be male victims, over a course of, in several of these cases, 20 years, 2 decades, the persistence can result in obtaining justice. So the message is going to be, as difficult as it might be to finally come forward. The statutes of limitation have been broadened. You will have your chance to have justice done, to confront your abuser, and try to seek justice and balance. So I think both of these cases send very strong messages to victims who may have been silenced by fear of recriminations, by fear that they won't be believed, shame. I think these are both very strong and compelling cases for victims to show.
Let me add this one quick thing. We live in a society where, as a woman, if you come out and claim certain things in which are being claimed right now, or a man is abusing you, or a man is just doing something within those lines, you're automatically believed, right? As a man, if a woman accuses you of these things, you're guilty until proven innocent. Excuse me. But when you as a man, and I'm not talking about this specific situation with R. Kelly, I'm saying in general, when you as a man come out and speak the truth, that a woman is abusing me, right? You said the exact same thing. Nobody believes you. Or let's just say, for example, you have certain people that do believe you. You get judged and you're called a bitch. You're called an a-hole. You're called the weak. You're called a pussy. People try to use so many derogatory names to try to shame you if you're getting abused by a woman. Because to them, it's like, bro, you're strong. You should be able. It's like, bro, if you're going to treat a woman a certain way when it comes to her making an accusation and then you believe her, you got to do that with the men, man. And now I know that there's so many double standards in this society, in this world, but it's like this right here, not talking about the situation, but I'm saying in general, like when a woman tries to come out and say that a man did this, that, and the third, hold those same women accountable if they were lying, if you figure out that they were lying, or hold women accountable if there are certain men that will come out and say the exact same thing. Because we can literally relate this situation to the Sienna May and Jack. Was it Jack? I forgot the Jack guy's name, but I actually did a video reaction to it. I think it was earlier this year or late last year. I forgot when I did the video, but I think it was earlier this year. It was Sienna May. They were TikTokers, and Jack something. I forgot the dude's name, but Jack something and Sienna May. This woman literally, I think she assaulted him in a sexual manner. And there was video evidence of her doing it to the guy. And when she assaulted him, I think somebody came and made a video about it and they made it broad awareness to it. But I don't think anything ended up happening to the girl. I think she probably lost her TikTok account, but that was all that happened. By her assaulting him the same way, she should be put on trial just the same way that this man is being put on trial because of the crime that she did. You feel what I'm saying? Like, that's very, very serious that nobody should ever play around with. It's not a game. It's not a joke. It's not a joke at all. That just goes to show you. But let's continue.
Strength and come forward after many, many years.
Right, against high-powered individuals. Well, Paul Batista, Jerika Duncan, thanks to both of you for joining us again. We want to recap for our viewers. R. Kelly has been sentenced to 30 years in prison. He's also facing more charges in August. We are waiting to potentially hear from some of the victims. If that happens, we will bring those comments to you live. For now, we're going to take a quick break. More news is next on CBS News.
An original documentary from CBS reports. An original
Witness yet another moment in history.
And feel like
They do.
Well, former President Trump's chosen candidate.
No, we're not doing all that. All right, that's the end of the video. All right, cool. So, like I said before, we live in a very, very double standard society that tries to promote certain things over others. Now, obviously, it's being said that he did what he did. If that's the case, then shame on him. He deserves what he gets. But we have to stop going for believing all women and really start to judge a certain situation based off of the complexity of the situation. Do your research, right? And I'm talking about the investigative forces. Do your research on certain situations, figure out what the true meaning behind it is, and then from there move accordingly. Once you do your true research, everything else is going to work out for itself. But if you don't do your true research, it's very, very hard to figure out what's going on and the effect that it can have long term in the future. You understand? So there are so many different factors involved. But at the same time as well, too, I hope justice is done to those who have been harmed, if they've been harmed, and the person who's wrong, let them serve their time. If you understand, it's because you're woke. If you don't understand, unfortunately, you're not woke. This is going to be in this live stream. If you like this live stream, you should go spam that like button, leave comments, share this video with your friends, subscribe to the channel at Wokebucks, WOKEEBUKS. Tap the notification bell to get all the latest videos that I post. Patreon link way down in the description below, and all social media links. So make sure you go give those a check. But without further ado, it's going to be in this live stream video. This is Wokebucks, and I'm out, man.